Hey, welcome to Watch from Waiting on the Lord. Today's November 21st, 2023. And I have, what do I have today? I have one story. I'm going to give you a news story, and I'm going to read you something. I try to pick things that, pastors on Christian YouTube channels tend not to talk about, and I'll tell you what that is now, and I'll read you a news story. Why was God so angry at David for taking a census? So if you haven't read Chronicles, you haven't read this about this. So I'll read that. It's very interesting. And not well, like always. I went out working yesterday. I just go door to door selling my candles, beeswax candles, and it seems whenever I do that, it's like I somehow end up with like the beginnings of kidney stones, and then I don't know what it is. Like it's not. I'm not stressful or anything when I do it. It just does it. Okay, so. Also, all the Black Friday stuff, I have to say this because it just, it ties in with everything that's happening in the world. You can't avoid all of this, like Black Friday. You just have that picture in your head of people, like you see, well, it's been like, what, over 20 years maybe? When they open up the doors and you see the people, it's usually it's in the States. And they're running and they're grabbing things and all that type of stuff. We can't escape these ads. We're not, us born again believers aren't like that. We're not worldly. And the reason I just said that is because I got my computer in front of me. I'm just ready to go to do this video. And even my bit defender for, that protects my computer is is putting something on the screen I don't want, like, hey, it's nice to have a sale and stuff like that, but, when it's enveloped in everything. Okay, so we have a guy here. The new leader of Argentina, and I've only just heard of this guy 2 days ago, and his name is Javier, Javier, Javier Milei. And I heard he flipped off the Pope, like he said something to the effect that I don't like you, and we don't want any attachments with you in China. Okay, so do you blame him right there? I'm like, right then I felt quite good about that. I'm like, just like that Speaker of the House in the States, and now you got this guy. Is God placing people for certain reasons? But this is a different story, so I'm not going to talk more about that. So the story is this: Argentina, Javier Milei wants the Falkland Islands back from Britain. He must hand them over non-negotiable. So I read a lot about the Falkland Islands campaign of the British. In 1982, it was Margaret Thatcher, and they won the war, Britain did. Nobody thought that they would win that war because it had to bring all their ships all the way over across the world. And so that was, since World War II, it was the first submarine warfare. I forget exactly what happened. I think a submarine sunk the Belgrano, I think it was called. It was like their cruiser, it was like their destroyer. But he wants it back. But this is so. Right away, you say to yourself, what country isn't there a dispute in? Even Canada with India, about, I don't know if you've read about that story, but it seems every country's got something going on, and just when you think nothing else is going to pop up, it does. But this sounds pretty calm right now, so I'll read it. At a time when the dust has not quite settled from his victory in the presidential elections of Argentina, Javier Milei, the media are making references to the foreign body policy he wants to pursue, saying the Falkland Islands should return to the land of the Tango. Very uncomfortable in this video, so please put up with me. It is recalled that the islands under British sovereignty with Malay, clarifying that he wants to do it through diplomacy and not through war, as it happened in '82. So the British would annihilate them, I believe. That's just from me reading, knowing weapon systems and stuff. As reported by the Daily Mail, according to Millie, Britain must hand them over. Sorry. As reported by the Daily Mail, according to Millie, I don't know who Millie is. I don't know if that's a U.S. general or if it's just someone else. Britain must hand them over non-negotiable. While wanting to strengthen his argument, he compares them to the return of Hong Kong to China. In fact, during his election campaign, he referred to this issue, stressing that the region known as Argentina, Javier Milei, is Argentine. Sometimes I find War News 24/7 articles a little bit, like their words aren't the best here, the wording. Argentina's sovereignty over the Malvinas Islands is non-negotiable. The Malvinas are Argentina. Now we have to figure out how to get them back. It's clear that the option of war is not a solution, he said. What we are proposing is to move towards a solution like the one England had with China. I watched that as they gave it back, as that last ship went out. I remember watching that. It was the 99-year. They leased the island. It was like, I don't know, it was like a 99-year deal, and they had to give it back to China. Towards a solution like the one England had with China on the Hong Kong issue. And that, in that context, the position of the people living on the islands cannot be ignored. You can't deny that these people are there. You can't ignore these human beings. You must negotiate with Britain and take into account the opinions of the people who live on the islands, the new president of Argentina had said. The Falklands War. The Falklands War, also known as the Falklands Conflict, the Falklands Crisis, was a 10-week war between Argentina and the United Kingdom over 2 British overseas territories in the South Atlantic, the Falkland Islands and the South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands. Making me hungry. It began on Friday, April 2nd, 1982, when Argentina invaded and occupied the Falklands Islands, and the following day the South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands, in an attempt to prove its long-claimed sovereignty over them. Pardon me a sec. On April 5th, the British government dispatched a naval force to engage the Argentine Navy and Air Force before launching an amphibious assault on the islands. I remember they used their, I can't think straight right now, but the vertical takeoff jets, the jump jets, the Harrier jets. That's what the British used, and it worked. They worked well. The conflict lasted 74 days and ended with the surrender of Argentina on June 14th, 82, and the return of the islands to British control. In total, 649 Argentine military personnel, 255 British military personnel, and 3 Falklands Islanders were killed during the hostilities. There's not even that many people that live, the British people on the Falklands Island. You'd have to think that this is going to have to be worked out somehow. The conflict was a major episode in the protracted contest, or, you know, things spiral out of control quickly. Protracted contest for control of the islands. Argentina confirmed, and continues to this day, that the islands are Argentine territory, and the Argentine government thus characterized its military action as a reclamation of its own territory. The British government viewed this as an invasion of territory that had been a crown colony since 1841. The Falklanders, who have inhabited the island since the early 19th century and mainly descendants of British settlers, are in favor of British sovereignty. So would I. I would want to be under British sovereignty too. Neither country, however, formally declared war. Both sides declared the island's areas a war zone and officially recognized a state of war between them. And hostilities were almost entirely confined to the disputed territories in the South Atlantic region where they are. The conflict had a significant impact on both countries and has been subject of various books, articles, films, songs. Patriotic sentiment was high in Argentina, but the outcome prompted a large protest against the military government, hastening its downfall. In the United Kingdom, remember in Argentina they have a large, pretty large, remember that's where a lot of the SS went, after World War II. That's why people say, did Hitler go there? Certainly a lot of SS members went there. And there is a large, like there's a place that's like 400,000 people. And all those people are Austrian and German. They're the descendants of the SS. If you don't know that, you can look that up if you don't believe me. I forget the name of the city, but it's true. So, in the United Kingdom, a conservative party government boosted by a successful result was re-elected the following year. The cultural and political weight of the conflict had less of an effect on Britain than on Argentina, of course, where it remains an ongoing topic of debate. Relations between the United Kingdom and Argentina were restored in '89, 7 years later, following a meeting in Madrid, Spain, at which the governments of the two countries issued a joint communique. It only made sense for them to be friends, right? No change in either country's position on sovereignty over the Falkland Islands was made explicitly. In 1994, Argentina's claim to these territories was added to its constitution. It's recalled that in 2013 a referendum was held on the Falklands, and 99.8% of its inhabitants were in favor of remaining in Britain. Also, after 2010, referendums were held in several disputed British overseas territories. But the majority of people wanting British sovereignty pay attention to the next story. Characteristically, in 2016, Gibraltar decided to stay in Britain as well, at a time when Spain was persistently claiming the specific territory. You know what's funny? As the world gets worse and worse and worse, I find, I'm not saying they don't have a claim or anything. I don't, I just know about the war. I don't know a lot, deeper into that. Who's really it is. If it's that close to their land, then it's just like how far out from the ocean belongs to a country. I think it's like 100 nautical miles or something. But if it was taken by the British that long ago, that's almost 200 years ago. I don't know. They're obviously going to have to work something out. And I lost what I was going to say, so I'm just going to continue with this. I'm going to take a sip and a bite, and I'm going to read this. This is very interesting. The answer that I'm getting from this is from Got Questions. I usually, they're not always right, but I think they're right in this case. I've read some stuff from Got Questions. I was absolutely wrong before, so pardon me. Why was God so angry at David for taking a census? So I hadn't really read Chronicles until about 6 months ago. I don't know, I just skipped that part. of the Bible because I just found so much repetition in there, so much stuff you just pass over because there's so much genealogy. I just pass over it because I know I won't understand most of it, and I missed a lot of stories. This is very interesting. So David wanted to take a census of Israel, and God became extremely angry with him. We're going to find out why. 2 Samuel 24:1 says, "Again, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, 'Go and take a census of Israel and Judah.'" The parallel account of the incident surrounding the census, however, reveals it was Satan who incited David to take the census. So was it David or was it Satan? Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. And there are verses, and I think I'll read some of them. Chronicles 21:1. "Then Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel." This discrepancy is often explained by the understanding that in order to achieve his purposes, sometimes God sovereignly permits Satan to act. God can use Satan in various ways, with the result being the refining, the disciplining, and purification of disobedient believers. Does that mean he's tempting? Well, we'll find out. Luke 22:31-32. I will read these as I go along. "Simon, Simon, behold, Simon Peter demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat." This is looking back in the New Testament. "But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers." 1 Corinthians 5. I'll just say. Yeah, I'm not going to read all that. There's a lot. Actually, I will. "It's actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and of a kind that is not tolerated even amongst pagans. For a man has his father's wife, and you're arrogant. Ought you not rather to mourn? Let whom has done this be removed from you." Let's just stop there. Such may have been the case with David. God allowed Satan to tempt him. You know, you read in the Bible, God doesn't tempt us. God doesn't. But he might use other things to test us, to refine us if we're disobedient. So that's why I'm reading this, because I don't think anyone knows the answer for sure. They don't. God allowed Satan to tempt him, and David sinned, revealing his pride, and then God dealt with David accordingly. There are other considerations concerning the passages relating David's sinful census. Here is 2 Samuel 24:1 in 4 translations. Again, the anger of the Lord. Like, this is ESV. I don't read those ones, but I'll read them to you. "Again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, 'Go, number Israel and Judah.'" I read KJV or NKJV, that's it. "Again, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he incited David against them." That's New International. "And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them." The ESV. KJV. "And again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them." I'll just stop there. I can't handle all the extended versions, and I just can't. Note that the New American Standard Bible says, "The anger of the Lord is what caused David to take the census." The other translations say, "He," in brackets the Lord, "did the inciting." The reason for the differences in translation is that in the original language there is no subject for the verb incited. The fact is, we aren't told exactly who moved David to take the census. To translate the verse literally, we would say there was who moved David against him, so it kind of doesn't make sense. Or, in quotations, "for one moved David against them." The translations above have taken to this to mean it was either God or his anger that caused David to take the census, but there are other options. So if you haven't read this in Chronicles, go read what happened. The unstated thing that moved David to conduct the census could have been David's own evil imagination. The one who moved David could be Satan, as in Chronicles 21:1 says, or the adversary, meaning the word Satan, mentioned in Chronicles 1 could be someone other than the devil. It could have been an unnamed counselor to David who prompted him in a foolish or sinful action. So what do I think? I think it was the devil. That's the most likely one. So no one knows, but that's the most likely one. As to why God was angry at David in those times, a man only had the right to count or number what belonged to him. Israel didn't belong to David. You can imagine the position David was in, right? He defeated just read Psalms. All those times where he begged God for help. And nowhere else in except for Maccabees 1 and 2. And David won more battles because he was a single person. So he was pretty powerful. He was the most powerful that was, besides Jesus Christ. And so you can imagine if that ever got to his head, right? And so when however he was incited to take a census, God didn't like it. So we don't know exactly what he was thinking, but Israel did not belong to David, and Israel belonged to God. So you can also think that, like when I read this immediately, I thought, well, what they're doing now, and every now and again in Canada they do a census, and in countries, is that evil? I don't know. Is it evil? Should we belong to our, like our business is our business type thing? I don't know, because when you read in the New Testament it says subject yourself to authorities and stuff, but there's quite a fine line, I guess, there. Okay, in Exodus 30:12, God told Moses, and I'll read it. When you take the census of the people of Israel, then each shall give a ransom for his life to the Lord when you number them, that there may be no plague among them when you number them. When you take a census of the Israelites to count them, each one must pay the Lord a ransom for his life at the time he's counted. Then no plague will come on them when you number them. It was up to God to command a census, and if David counted, he should have only done it at God's command, receiving a ransom to atone for the counting. That's why God was angry with Israel, and it's why David was conscience stricken after he counted Israel. David knew it was wrong and begged God to take away the guilt of his sin. 2 Samuel 24:10. Read that. But David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people. And David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. But now, O Lord, please take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. I hope this uploads. Last time I did a long video, it just... yeah. God gave David a choice of 3 punishments for his sin. Listen to this. 3 years of famine. It's important to know. 3 years of famine. It's a long time. 3 months of fleeing before the enemy, are 3 days of plague. David chose the third, and the Lord then punished Israel with a plague that killed 70,000 men from the tribe of Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, or just from Dan. As for why God punished the whole nation for the sin of the king, that's exactly the question King Dave. 2 Samuel. Then David spoke to the Lord when he saw the angel who was striking the people, and said, "Behold, I have sinned. I have done wickedly, but these sheep, what have they done? Please let your hand be against me and against my father's house." Right below, if you've ever heard of this before. If you haven't. Why, when he was the one who had sinned, did the people have to suffer? He even requested that God's hand be against him and his family only, and that God would spare the people. But as with the account of Job, God chose not to give a reason for his actions. Perhaps it was because of Israel's multiplied sins and rebellion against God through the centuries. Perhaps it was a lesson to the people, so we don't know. It could have been because the people were sinful. We don't know. And that's why we don't know the answer to this. Perhaps it was a lesson to the people and to us as well, that the people suffer when their leaders go astray. Just look now. The reality is that God didn't justify his actions with a reason, nor does he have to. What I'm talking about is Biden and the United States and Canada and Europe. You would think these things they're quite obviously, to me, done by God to punish a godless nation. Pardon me. That's what I think. The reality is that God didn't justify his actions with a reason, nor does he have to. This is the part that gets me. Of the 3 choices presented to David, the first 2 would have involved some level of dependency upon the mercy of man. The warfare, of course, would be as severe as the enemy wanted it to be. That reminds me of something, and I'll say that in a second. The famine would require Israel to seek food from other nations, relying on the pity of their neighbors. Instead of relying on the mercy of any human, David chose to rely on the mercy of God. See that? The pestilence was, after all, the most direct form of punishment from God, and in the plague, they could seek only God for relief instead of man. That's why he chose it, because he believed in God. The psalmist tells us, as for God, his way is perfect. If God's ways are perfect, then we can trust that whatever he does and whatever he allows is also perfect. Our responsibility to God is to obey him, trust him, and to submit to his will, whether we understand it or not. As we see in 2 Samuel 24:16, so let's read that. And when the angel stretched out his hand towards Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord relented from the calamity and said to the angel who was working destruction among the people. Okay, so he has angels that can wreck things very quickly. It's enough. Now stay your hand. And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. God was grieved because of the things that were happening to his people, and he called off the punishment. Even in his rebuke, God still shows his love and mercy. What was I going to say up here? See if I can remember it. I'm going to have to read over this. Yeah. The three choices presented to David, the first two would have involved the same level of dependency upon the mercy of man. The warfare, of course, would be as severe as... Okay, so there it is. That reminds me of something that all of us are hearing now. If David would have chosen to be at the mercy of the enemies, running from the enemies for 3 months, God wouldn't have his back at all. So what the enemy would do, they would have absolute free reign of David and of Israel. What does that remind me of? It reminds me of what people are waiting to happen right now. That is the Holy Spirit to be removed. Don't you see the parallels with those things? When God removes his protection, evil is allowed to abound and multiply. Because what people don't know, who aren't learned enough, and who aren't believers, is that there's a spirit of protection everywhere. And what you're seeing in the world right now is like, to me, it's partially let go. It's like 50% let go. There's so much evil in our world right now. And if that lets go to 100%, all evil will be allowed to flourish. No good will, you'll have your righteous people, your believers, but there'll be quite few of them. So thanks for watching today's video. Very interesting though, eh? That was some God questions. I'm going to leave that in the description box. God bless.